Okay, so here we go. Presentation 5. Supplements. Are they all just hype, or should we actually be including them for optimal changes in body composition? This is the one that a lot of people, I think, get wrong. They start to focus on supplements in the beginning without getting the big foundations, the big rocks in place, the energy balance, the protein, the macronutrients, things like that. They start focusing on supplements. But really, it's the top of the pyramid, right? It's not as important. It's not going to make a large difference. But because people constantly ask about supplements, why don't we go through a presentation on it? And there are some specific ones for vegans, which are probably necessary. So supplements, performance, health, and fat loss are the least important part of your nutritional plan. The vast majority of supplements on the market don't do anything except burn a large hole in your wallet. There are a few select supplements that may be worth implementing for increasing health span, strength, endurance, muscle gain, and fat loss. And we're specifically going to be focusing on the ones that are going to be improving our strength, muscle gain, and fat loss in this particular presentation. So there are an essential supplement, B12, specifically for people following plant-exclusive diets, vegan diets with no animal products. And there is, some arguments to be made that people following an omnivorous diet should be using a B12 supplement as well. So, but that's definitely, one of the main ones that we need to be implementing. But the rest of them, you could probably take or leave them if your diet is adequate. So are they necessary? It really depends. We're going to look at health, we're going to look at fat loss, and we're going to look at strength and muscle. And we're going to determine which ones are necessary for us to be focusing on. So for health, vegans and omnivores alike are susceptible to micronutrient deficiencies, but there are certain nutrients that may potentially be lacking in a plant-based diet. If a plant-based diet is not well planned and appropriately supplemented. So there's certain nutrients, like we talked about, B12, and there's others we're going to cover in this presentation, that if you're not planning your diet well, if you're not ensuring you're ticking all those boxes for health like we covered in that last presentation, and if you're not supplementing with B12, then you may run into some deficiencies there. And just like omnivores take multivitamins and vitamin D and fish oils and things like this, vegans should probably look into some of those products as well, especially if their diet isn't really well planned. There's a huge variation between individuals though, so consider the nutrient needs of a woman of childbearing age and a caloric deficit, so she's losing body fat, compared to a 75-year-old male needing to gain weight. Their supplement needs are going to be very, very different. Likely someone, a female of childbearing age, whether she's in a diet or not, is probably looking to include a lot more vitamin D or potentially folic acid, if she's looking to conceive. But then a 75-year-old male is going to be probably looking at predominantly creatine and protein and things like this to ensure that they are gaining weight. So there's differences across the life cycle. However, implementation of a well-planned whole food plant-based diet will cover most of your bases and you won't have to worry about too many supplements. So hopefully by the end of this presentation, you'll come away with a bit of knowledge so that you don't get duped into buying all these heavily marketed, cherry-picked studied supplements that are just going to burn a hole in your wallet. So for fat loss, during fat loss, you will be eating fewer micronutrients just as a result of less food coming in. So you're eating less calories, there's less food, there's less chance to get in a lot of those really nutrient-dense foods that are going to meet your micronutrient needs. So some studies show popular diets are actually micronutrient deficient. So therefore, during a fat loss phase, it's a good idea to create a nutritional safety net and have a daily multivitamin or a few specific vitamins and minerals, and we're going to cover some of those in this presentation so that you're still covering your bases when calories are a little bit lower. And supplement needs, for strength and muscle gain, supplement needs will depend on the individual sport needs. For performance, consider the differences between the required physiological adaptations and fueling requirements of an endurance athlete versus a powerlifter. They're both going to have very different outcomes when it comes to what they want to achieve within their sport, and they want to have very different adaptations to the training that they're doing. So their supplementation protocols are going to be geared towards that. Someone who is doing endurance sports might be focusing on beta-alanine supplementation, for example, or something like cherry juice or beetroot juice and things like this. Whereas a powerlifter, probably going to be focusing on things like caffeine and creatine because it's about that acute response, short, sharp, explosive energy. So they require different fueling strategies and they require different adaptations from their training. Research shows efficacy for a few specific supplements for increasing muscle gain. I'm going to cover those in just a moment. So let's get straight into it. The body composition essentials, which is what this presentation is all about. Number one is protein powder. Now, I usually don't put protein powder in a supplement presentation, but because it's one that's likely going to be asked by a lot of people is what should I do about protein powder? Should I take protein powder? It's not one that I technically class as a supplement. It's more just a food. It's just a really convenient way of getting our protein in, and usually from a plant-based source such as soy or pea or rice or hemp or whatever it may be. So do we actually need it? There are some of the vegan community that think protein powders are unnatural or unnecessary, and totally fine if that's you and you don't want to be taking protein. Totally cool. You can get it from your food. Of course, in a lower calorie state, it's a little bit harder. And getting protein powder is really cost effective. It's really convenient, and it tastes great. Mixes in with a lot of different foods, and there's no evidence to say that it is going to provide any negative effects on human health. And potentially for vegans, there's going to be really positive effects because often they have things like iron added to them, fiber, things like this that are going to be beneficial for you. It's going to be goal dependent based on your macronutrient needs, right? So just really quickly here, sedentary persons likely will not need protein supplementation because the recommended intake is so low. So if you look at the general recommendation of protein for the general population, anywhere from 0.8 to 1 grams of protein per kilogram. It's a really, really small amount of protein for an 80 kilogram individual. 80 grams of protein is not a lot, very easy to hit through your food intake. So there's going to be no need for protein supplementation. But for someone who does have a goal of building muscle mass, dropping body fat, obviously if you're watching this, that's you, then protein supplementation is probably going to be a lot more helpful because your intakes need to be higher. So it's contextual. Protein intake shouldn't just be blanket statements. It is contextual based on the goal of the individual. On the other hand, an individual in a fatless phase may use protein powders when calories are restricted. If you've only got a certain amount of calories to play with and you're tossing up whether to get 20 grams of protein from a bowl of tofu, which is going to be, say 250 calories, or you might get it from a quick protein powder mix into soy yogurt or a chia pudding or something like that, and you can get those calories down a lot lower. There's a trade-off there, right? So there's weighing up the cost benefits of what to do with your calories and where to get your protein from to enable you to hit your lower calorie targets a lot easier. It's a convenient and cost-effective method to reach higher protein targets, as we've discussed. So over 1.6 grams per kilo, pretty hard to hit if you're not using a supplement. Now, is plant protein effective? That is the question we want to know. Plant-based protein powders with equivalent leucine, which is one of our amino acids, equivalent leucine content shown to stimulate muscle protein synthesis to the same degree as whey protein. Now, whey protein is often heralded as like the gold standard of protein metabolism and enhancing muscle protein synthesis. And it's, I used to live off the stuff, right? However, when we look at plant proteins, generally they're not going to be stimulating the leucine and hitting the leucine threshold to a higher degree or a higher extent, enough to create muscle protein synthesis. However, when we have plant proteins that are mixed together, a blend of different plant proteins, we are able to achieve that, and it's shown to achieve the same muscle protein synthesis response. A blend of pea and rice is recommended as single ingredient plant protein powder such as soy, hemp, pea, or rice only powder. So if you only have one of those ingredients in your powder, they do not contain sufficient leucine per serve and would require large intakes to stimulate muscle protein synthesis. So say you are consuming just a soy-based powder or a hemp-based powder, you're just going to have to consume a heck of a lot more protein powder to achieve leucine threshold to then achieve muscle protein synthesis, whereas you could just have a combination of two of those, predominantly pea and rice, and achieve similar muscle protein synthesis response from the same amount of total protein consumed. Hopefully that makes sense. I'm not confusing you there. It's just about getting the most bang for your buck out of your protein powder. So it's about choosing a blend as opposed to a single ingredient powder. So some considerations. Looking for blends is a big one. Look for leucine content of between 2.5 to 3.5 grams per serving, and that's shown to maximally stimulate muscle protein synthesis if their goal is, of course, to build some muscle mass and lean out. You can find these on some of the back of the packet of the protein and look at the nutritional profile if they've got the amino acid profile listed. Often they don't. You might have to go on the website or do some own research, but generally you can just say, hey, look for a blended protein, and you're probably going to be good and won't have to look too much further than that. Be aware of fancy marketing and overpriced products as well. So a lot of protein industry products are well overpriced, and it's the same stuff that everyone else is giving you. They just have better marketing and better influencers and all this kind of stuff, and they jack the price up. And too many times I have clients taking really expensive protein powders, and they don't even like the stuff. And just lastly here's an idea of that leucine dose per serve, and on the left you can see whey concentrate per 100 grams. You've got 8.8 grams, which is 2.6 grams of leucine per 30 gram serve. On the right side we've got pea and rice blend protein at 100 grams, so 70% pea protein, 30% rice protein, which is generally what you'll find in most of the blended protein powders. And you can see the leucine dose is 8.6, so just a tad lower than the whey, but pretty much going to have equivocal results, and 3.4 grams of leucine per 40 gram serve. So generally we're taking a bit of a bigger serve when we're taking the plant proteins. So going to be just as effective as whey protein if you take a blend. So that's the key takeaway there. Other things to look out for: corn and potato protein is something to look out for in the future due to their high leucine content. So I haven't seen any on the market yet, and I'm really looking out for it, is a corn-based protein powder or a potato-based protein powder, because they have 8.8 grams and 6.7 grams per 100 grams of protein respectively. That's of leucine. So going to be comparative with taking a whey protein or a pea and rice protein. So hopefully we see some of the more of those coming out on the market in the future, because I think they're going to be really cost-effective options for people as well. All right, moving on to creatine. Another big one for body composition. Shown to have greater effects in vegans due to lower baseline muscle creatine levels in the first place. We don't eat meat, we don't eat salmon, where a lot of the creatine in your food is coming from in the first place. And creatine monohydrate is the only proven form. So don't go looking at all these other different variations of creatine on the market that, again, are just marketing and trying to get your money. Go for the creatine monohydrate. The biggest benefit is shown in short, high-intensity exercise with short recovery. So things like your lifting in the gym, sprinting, sports like that, where there's a short, hard bout of exercise and then there's a rest period. So we have improved isometric strength. We have increased training load that can be tolerated, which then means you can increase your hypertrophy. We have increased recovery. We have anabolic signaling, satellite cell proliferation. We have amplifies training-induced adaptations. All those benefits for muscular adaptations to training with creatine supplementation. So there's an absolute huge amount of research on creatine, and it's just one of those ones that is it can't really be argued with these days, is the fact that it has huge benefits on resistance training outcomes. So endurance athletes also will see a benefit from creatine. It has increased muscular endurance, shown to have lactate threshold occurring at a higher intensity, so meaning you can go harder for longer, and increased time to exhaustion, increased glycogen storage, all that good stuff. And then there are some other benefits as well, such as significant increase in memory and intelligence, less decline in performance after sleep deprivation, and some benefits for elderly populations as well. Creatine combined with resistance training increase lean mass and strength more than resistance training alone. So if you've got, elderly populations, or if you're, 50, 65 plus, now is probably a good time to start supplementing with creatine if you're not already, as it's been shown to help increase lean tissue and maintain your bone mineral density, maintain your posture, maintain your movement and function, more than just doing weight training on its own. and lower incidence of sarcopenia. So when do we take creatine? Best consumed after exercise, so just mix it in with your protein shake, but at the same time, it probably doesn't really matter too much when you take it as long as you're taking it daily. And the dosage for it is, what I like to recommend is 0.1 grams per kilo of your body weight. So for myself at 80 kilograms, taking 8 grams a day is my dose. But roughly 2 to 5 grams per day is probably a decent place to sit. And there probably needs to be some more research on specifically taking creatine in vegans to see if a smaller dose would produce the same result, just due to the fact that we don't have high baseline levels of creatine in the first place. So takeaway from that one is just take your creatine every day. No need to come off it. No real need to do a loading phase. You can if you want, but you can just continuously take it 5 grams, 8 grams a day, whatever your dose is. Huge benefits for your body composition, and just remembering that it is a supplement that works chronically over time. It's not going to be this acute response to creatine. You're not going to take creatine before your workout and then suddenly have this huge response from your training. You often see a creatine in like pre-workouts and things like that, and it's not going to provide a benefit for that session, but it might provide a benefit if you're taking it every day for a month, and then you've reached muscle creatine saturation within the muscle, and then you may see a performance benefit from that. So it's about that continuous supplementation. Cool, let's move on. The third one, body composition essentials, is caffeine. Okay, absolutely essential. It's not just about the morning buzz with caffeine. It reduces reaction time, increases muscle fiber contraction, improves decision making, increases your strength, improves endurance, reduces rating of perceived exertion, so how hard you felt a set or a session was, possibly reduces your appetite, which I've noticed myself a lot and with clients as they're using it a bit of an appetite suppressant, and possibly stimulates lipolysis. And some considerations for caffeine. We want to taper caffeine intake down towards the end of the day to avoid sleep disruption. Remembering that caffeine does have a half-life of 4 to 6 hours. So if you're taking caffeine at 12 p.m. midday, 4 to 6 hours later, there's going to be half the amount of that caffeine still in your system. So if you take 200 milligrams at midday, there's going to be 100 milligrams in your system at 4 p.m. and potentially up to 6 p.m. And then another 4 hours after that, there's going to be 50 grams in your system. 50 milligrams. So it doesn't just spike and then drop away. It does stay there. So we want to be aware of that and just slowly taper your intake down towards the end of the day, especially if you struggle with sleep. Tolerance can inhibit performance enhancing effect. So yeah, we do want to be aware of how much caffeine we are taking habitually. If we're constantly taking caffeine every day, all day, and then we want a really big response from our training, from taking caffeine pre-training, you might not get that same performance enhancing benefit if you've increased your tolerance so much to caffeine, right? So it's a case of taking it when you need it as opposed to always living on the stuff. If you really want the benefits from caffeine in your training, try eliminating caffeine at all other times of the day and just taking caffeine pre-workout. You'll notice a big response there. To suppress tiredness, doses of 1 to 3 milligrams a day per kilogram per day is decent. So, for 80 kilogram person, again, at the lower end of that, even just 80 milligrams of caffeine, which is about a small can of Red Bull or 1 shot of coffee, is fine to suppress tiredness. And I'll get onto the doses for performance enhancing effects in a moment. So aim to keep your caffeine intake as low as possible in order to get the stimulatory effects when it is truly needed. So when we're taking it, 30 to 45 minutes before your first hard set or activity. So try not to take it too late. A lot of people will start taking it as they're training. It's going to be far too late to provide benefit for that first set of training. Take it 30 to 45 minutes before your first hard set. So for myself, I generally take it 30 minutes before I plan to start doing my hard training. That gives it time to kick in as I'm warming up. And then by the time I've done my first hard set, it's at its peak. How much do we take? So for performance enhancing benefits, 3 to 5 milligrams per kilo is the recommended dose from the research, but we do want to assess tolerance with that. That is a huge dose for most people. And if that huge dose is going to affect your performance because you're jittery and you can't sit still, or you're feeling sick or faint or sweating, then yeah, that's too much, right? We do want to assess tolerance. So start small. 2 milligrams per kilo is totally fine, and that's probably 2 to 3 milligrams per kilo is usually the dose you'd find in most pre-workouts anyway, that are 150 milligrams to 250 milligrams in most pre-workout supplements. So suppress tiredness 1 to 3 milligrams, and for performance 3 to 6, or maybe start at 2. And here we just want to quickly cover BCAAs and EAAs. One that will definitely come up. I'm not recommending it here, but I just want to cover it off really quickly. So branched chain amino acids are your leucine, isoleucine, and valine. As we discussed, leucine already is one of those essential amino acids for muscle protein synthesis, building muscle and all that good stuff. So there is no use for BCAAs if your total protein is adequate. That should say adequate. So if your total protein is enough per day, if you're taking in enough based off the recommendations we've already given you, then there's no use for branched chain amino acids. They only provide the 3 amino acids, and so there's a potential benefit for essential amino acid supplements where they provide all 9. It could be more efficacious. However, it could just be better to drink a protein shake. It's also cheaper, and it's a little bit easier to do. Be aware of marketing. Branched chain amino acids has had a huge marketing team over the years, and I think it's kind of dropped away these days, or I'm not seeing much of it. However, it is one of those things that's still sticking around, and they can get you with the marketing telling you it's going to be beneficial for you. Be aware of where the aminos are also sourced, because a lot of the times it's coming from animal products. So the take home here is, if you're consuming a diet adequate in carbohydrates, protein, and total calories, you're unlikely to get any benefit from supplemental BCAAs, especially if you're hoping they will improve resistance training performance. So just be aware of that. If you're taking adequate protein, it won't do anything more for you. There may be some really, really specific scenarios where branched chain amino acids could be used if your protein intake is really low for whatever reason. But at the end of the day, if you've got access to BCAAs, you've probably got access to a protein shake. So you might as well take a protein shake and get a lot more benefit from it than just taking branched chain amino acids. But at the end of the day, no harm to it. If you want to take it, go for it. So just quickly covering off the health essentials to finish up this presentation here. We're going to cover off B12, vitamin D, and EPA and DHA, or your omega-3s. Really quickly, whizzing through it, because again, this one is predominantly focused on body composition outcomes as opposed to the health outcomes, but these are probably some essentials that you want to look at for health. B12 deficiency may take a while to have an effect, but it can cause anemia and problems with our nervous system and brain. B12 found virtually in all animal products, so there's no reliable sources in foods, in plant foods, I should say, and is formed by bacteria, so it does not have to come from animals. When we look at vitamin D, it's quite hard to find in foods, but is found in fortified products and supplementation. Most vitamin D is actually synthesized when UV rays from the sun hit our skin, so getting outside is great. Obviously, be aware of how much time you're out there, because we want to be aware of the negative effects on our skin as well from UV. It improves immune function, bone health, reduces depressive symptoms, and potentially improves strength and fat loss. And lastly here, EPA and DHA, unsaturated fats are, unsaturated fats, I thought they said facts. Unsaturated fats that are important for cardiovascular health, eye, and brain function. So your vegan sources, your microalgae, EPA and DHA, or chia, flax, hemp seeds, walnuts, canola oil are your ALA sources. So plant-based sources of ALA are converted to EPA and DHA, but the process is just not very efficient. It's usually between 8 to 20% converted to EPA, and then only between 0.5 to 9% converted to DHA, which is arguably the more important conversion. So because those conversion rates from plant-based sources such as chia and flax and hemp seeds aren't crazy high, we do want to make sure we're either taking a lot of plant-based sources or we're going to supplement with an algae supplement where you're getting pure EPA and DHA as opposed to conversion from ALA. And there is some data to suggest that reducing omega-6 rich oils can inhibit the conversion. Omega-6 rich oils can inhibit the inversion of ALA to EPA and DHA, so there's some data to suggest that we can reduce omega-6 rich oils such as sunflower, safflower, corn, sesame, and grapeseed oils. I wouldn't put too much weight in that. It's just a case of, hey, don't go eating a lot of oil in your foods in the first place, and generally try and increase ALA-based sources of omega-3s. So dosing for all three of these, for your B12, 1000 mcg 2 to 3 times per week is fine. So you can take a big dose of B12 and vitamin D as well at one time, and it will be fine. Or you can just do a daily supplement if it helps to ingrain that behavior and develop that habit for yourself. So 100 mcg per day is also just a decent dose to be taking. And these doses are constantly changing. I mean, people recommend different doses all the time, so this could change in the future. But from what information I have available to me right now, this seems to be a decent dosing for most people. A couple of times a week, a big dose, or just a daily dose of 100. Dosing for vitamin D, we want to spend 5 to 30 minutes in the sun, exposure between 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. depending on how much sun is out. Of course, supplement if required during winter months, or just get a blood test and then make sure that your levels are good. I think for most people in the southern hemisphere, you're going to be okay most of the time. However, during winter, I still suggest taking vitamin D, and especially in the modern day where most of the time we're spent inside cars and offices and wrapped up in clothing, we're not actually getting our skin exposed to UV light. So it's a good idea to get outside as much as you can, and then in the summer, probably not such a big deal. 1000 IU per day of D3. You can get vegan sources of D3, so look out for a vegan one. If it's not a vegan one, it'll be coming from lanolin, so like sheep's wool, so just be aware of that. 1000 IU per day for vitamin D is a great dose to hit. And then lastly, for EPA and DHA, best case is to supplement with a algae oil, 300 milligrams of DHA, or a mix of EPA and DHA equaling 500 milligrams of total omega-3. So looking for that on the back of the panel. But of course, that does cost a fair amount to consume algae oil. If cost is a factor, take 3 grams of ALA per day. And that can be as simple as a tablespoon of ground flaxseed and a tablespoon of chia every day. And then you might add in some things like walnuts throughout the day, and maybe some canola oil, just to kind of bump up those doses a little bit as well. But it's pretty simple. It's just a case of, hey, if you really want to make sure you're getting absolutely everything, if you want to cover your bases, then potentially having the algae oil is a much better solution. And I believe that is it. So the too long didn't read. If all that was just a whole bit of gibberish for you and you didn't really pay attention, then pay attention now. This is the vegan muscle stack. If you're really wanting to optimize body composition and you're looking at supplements, this is all you're going to need. Number 1, your B12 supplement, around 100 mcg per day. Number 2, we want to take an algae-based EPA and DHA, or 2 to 3 tablespoons of seeds daily will cover your bases. Number 3, we want to take a vegan vitamin D. 1000 IU per day is the suggested intake. If you're in summer and you're outside a fair amount like myself, probably no need to be taking it. But if you want to make sure, go get yourself a blood test and get those levels checked. Number 4, pea and rice protein blend to ensure you're getting enough protein, but also ensure you're getting a high amount of leucine in each of those serves. And number 5, a multi-ingredient pre-workout containing creatine, caffeine, beta-alanine, taurine, and L-carnitine, L-tartrate are some other options as well we haven't covered here, but they have some potential benefits even for vegans, or specifically for vegans. But the main ones there is getting your creatine and your caffeine in. Doesn't have to be a pre-workout. It can be, you're getting your caffeine from a double shot of coffee and you're taking your creatine post-workout and your protein shake. Boom, you're ticking those boxes as well. So a great way to go there. And then lastly, number 6 is just considering an all-in-one vegan supplement such as Terraseed, or many of the other ones that are on the market now. If in a deficit, or want to always cover your bases. So if you're in a calorie deficit, you don't have a lot of calories coming in, you can easily just take an all-in-one supplement and be done with it. Or if you just always want to cover your bases like I am at the moment, just taking that 2-a-day tablet or 1-a-day tablet or whatever it may be, generally covers your bases for a lot of things like your B12, your vitamin D, and your omega-3s. So finishing up here, supplements can be useful, but not all are worth your time or your money. stick with the basics and do the work. So it's basically about getting in there, getting into the gym, putting in the effort into your diet, tracking your food, ensuring that you get enough protein, all of that good stuff, taking off some of those health essentials we covered in the last presentation. And then the supplements are just the little cherry on top to add in there to give you that little extra boost. And as you can see there, there's not many that we want to focus on. There's only a few core ones, and I don't believe that's going to change in the near future. So focus on those. Don't worry about the rest of it, and you'll be seeing great results in no time. We're going to come back with one final wrap-up presentation covering off everything that we've covered in this course so far. So look out for that one. But for now, go get some training in, and we'll see you in the next one.